Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys so much for taking some time out of your day to join me. In today's video, I am going over the Saturday afternoon divisional round game between the Tennessee Titans and the Cincinnati Bengals. Over the next 2 days, it's Tuesday today, tomorrow's Wednesday, I'm going to be dropping all 4 games. I'm going to do rundowns, recaps of all of them so that I can give you guys my opinions and perspectives on each one. Going to talk about some of the key moments, what I saw, what we can learn from it, and what it means as we get into the championship round. I am not gonna lie, after doing some prep on all of these games, I am likely to get very emotional in some of the recaps. I will do my best to contain myself, but no promises. If you are new to the channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. Please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means so very much to me and it helps me out a ton. I appreciate it greatly. I'm looking to get my first 200 subscribers. With that all done, let's get into this version of the Relentless Rundown. First things first, this was probably the best divisional round in the history of the NFL, and I do not say that lightly. What we got to witness this weekend was simply incredible. The previous record for overall point differential was 18 points between the 4 games. And not only was that record shattered, as the games here combined for just 15-point differential, but we witnessed an overtime game, we saw an ice bowl. Every single game was decided by the final play. We also saw a shootout, a slugfest, and an epic comeback that fell just short. History was made this weekend, and it was glorious to behold. The Tennessee Titans came into this game with home field advantage, and they were riding an excellent defense and the return of King Henry against the red-hot Cincinnati Bengals, who had survived the Raiders last week in the opening round. I anticipated coming in that it was going to be a street fight between both of these teams, and boy, was it ever. My biggest questions coming into the game for Tennessee: how much of an impact would Derrick Henry actually have? And could that defense continue to hold up against a Bengals offense that had been on fire for over a month? For the Bengals, could they contain a potentially fresh and healthy Henry? And how would Joe Burrow respond to the inevitable pressure that he was going to face with everything on the line? We're gonna dive right in to the Titans side of the ball on offense, and we're gonna start with the obvious. Ryan Tannehill was absolutely brutal in this game. He threw 3 picks. One was on the very first play from scrimmage, where he threw a really bad ball to Julio Jones and it never really had a chance. The second one was with Tennessee trailing 16-6 midway through the 3rd quarter, and that almost broke the Titans' backs. The last one was the eventual nail in the coffin with 20 seconds to go in the game. Now, I won't get too far ahead of myself. It was not all bad for Ryan. He did have a few great throws, 2 notable ones being a 41-yard bomb to AJ Brown that was early in the 2nd quarter. It had set up that Titans' first scoring drive. The second one was a 40-yarder once again to Brown, who found a seam in the middle of the field to set up a Titans field goal, and that made it a 1-possession game. Easily his best throw of this entire game came late in the 3rd. After a poor turnover call by the Zebras gave the Titans a chance, and we will get to that in a bit, I promise. Tannehill found a streaking AJ Brown down the sideline, and he had a 34-yard strike to tie the game up at 16. There was absolutely no window to be seen, and the ball was placed perfectly on the back shoulder next to the pylon for the score to tie it up. Tannehill was under some duress, but the pressure was not what caused his errors in this game. It just seemed like he did not understand the team that he was playing for and what they actually needed him to do. Instead of managing the clock, managing possessions like they paid the guy to do, he played the part of a gunslinger at times, and this was not the team that needed that. He will take a ton of heat for this game. I don't think there's any doubt about that. As well, he should. But for me, he was not the biggest culprit that caused the Titans to come up short, as crazy as that sounds. Derrick Henry looked rusty at best in his return. Honestly, for me, it looked like he came back a little too soon in an effort to try to help his team. Though it was possible that Bengals run defense, which ranked top 7 in the NFL coming in, was just that good. He did not move the needle for me, and while he did pick it up as the game went along, per usual, it was not the King Henry that we were used to seeing. His day was highlighted by a Wildcat touchdown that tied it up at 6-all for Tennessee, but he finished with just 62 yards on 20 carries. The best run of the day here came from D'Onta Foreman. He had a powerful 45-yard run that was squandered by Tannehill's second pick. He looked like Tennessee's best back in the game by far, and I would have loved to see him get more involved in that offense. That was a missed opportunity for the Titans without question. Par for the course, A.J. Brown had a monster outing in a big spot. He racked up 142 yards on just 5 catches. That was good for an average of over 28 yards with that score. He was the big play threat whenever the Titans needed to turn the tide in the game, and he was complimented nicely for the first time in a long time by Julio Jones. He had 6 catches for 62 yards. Incredibly, only 4 Titans caught balls in this game, and the combination of Jones and Brown had all but 8 targets. There simply was not a threat anywhere else on the field, and there is no question that those type of shortcomings desperately need to be addressed in the offseason. The Titans actually outgained the Bengals in this game by 8 yards, 353 to 345, but they converted on just 1 of their 8 third down attempts, and it was a monster reason why they lost the time of possession battle by nearly 7 minutes. They were also just 1 for 3 in the red zone. On the other side of the ball, you really could not ask for anything more from that Tennessee defense. They did everything they could to try to hang in there and give their team a chance. They were put in difficult situations consistently against an explosive offense and answered the call, holding Cincinnati to field goals when they had short fields. The pass rush played on another level. They racked up 9 sacks. Jeffrey Simmons was a man possessed, and he had 3 of them, but it certainly was a team effort, as 7 defenders had at least half a sack. The biggest of which came in the fourth quarter with Cincinnati in field goal range and a chance to break the 16-all tie. On third down, Joe Burrow was swallowed up and taken down way back at the 48, and they caused a punt instead of giving up those 3 points. It was likely the greatest defensive performance that did not end in a victory in the history of the NFL, and they were able to contain Joe Mixon on the ground for nearly the entire game. The Titans' defense was also the beneficiary of the most controversial play in the game, with 1 minute and 13 seconds to go in the third, in which a ball bounced off of Samaje Perine's hand and into the hands of Amani Hooker. Now, I watched the replay on this throw and catch at least 5 or 6 times, and it was called an interception on the field. It was certainly close. However, replay clearly showed the ball hitting the ground as Hooker got possession. Once the ball hits the ground, the play is over. That's it. It's done. And while it can touch the ground once you have already established possession, you cannot use it to get possession, which obviously here was the case. It was a brutal blow to the Bengals and a really bad call, to be frank. I'm not really sure what the referee saw on the play. It completely turned the feel of this game and gave all the momentum to Tennessee, who came up just short of capitalizing on it. Now to the coaching aspect on the Titans side of the ball, and this is where I'm going to start to get a little hot and bothered, so in advance, I apologize. I really respect Coach Mike Vrabel. He was rightfully in the NFL Coach of the Year conversation coming into this game, but I think the biggest part of this loss has to rest on his shoulders. He seemed like he just did not want to take a lead, and it left me questioning his decision making on multiple occasions. The first one was on the Titans touchdown that came with the game tied up at 6. After Cincinnati got a 12-man on the field penalty on the extra point, the Titans elected to go for 2 instead of taking the lead. A few things here. Yes, it was early in the game, I understand that, but I am of the mindset that you take the points when you can get them, and you certainly take a lead anytime you can, especially in the playoffs. It was the first quarter here, guys. What are you doing trying for 2 in that situation? Is the 2-point lead actually worth risking instead of having a lead at all? Not for me. The Titans, of course, were stuffed short on the play. They ended up settling for the time. It was a really poor decision that would end up costing the Titans later on in the game, and it certainly would not be his last. Halfway through the fourth, with the game tied at 16, Tennessee faced a 3rd down and 1 from the Bengals' 35-yard line. They ran a fake handoff to King Henry, and Tannehill kept it. He lost about half of a yard. For me, this was a questionable call because it only got worse on what they did on 4th down. Tennessee ran right up the gut for the 2nd time in a row, and Henry was swallowed up in the backfield to turn it over. This marked not the first, not the second, but the 3rd play where the Titans needed a single yard and they had nothing better to call than a dive. I do not hate the run to Derrick Henry. I think that is a perfectly fine call, but I want to state that he was smothered nearly the entire day, and D'Onta Foreman seemed to find much more success against that fearsome Bengals front. If it is me, I am giving the ball to the guy with a 45-yarder and 66 yards on 4 carries. Secondly, I get that it was a long field goal here, but Randy Bullock had made 6 out of 7 field goals in the Titans' previous 4 games, and he didn't miss at all in 3 out of those 4 games. Mike Vrabel obviously didn't think that it was worth a chance to try to take the lead again. And that just does not sit right with me. I do not understand why he was so against it. Finally, I go back to the Titans' decision to go for 2 in that first quarter because the Titans were actually able to get a stop and move the ball downfield as time was running out. Now, of course, the game could have gone completely differently, but if you take that point early on, you're simply able to run out the clock instead of having to force the issue where Tannehill ended up killing you. There were simply way too many squandered opportunities and the miscalculations performed by the coaching staff. And if we're playing the blame game, there is no bigger figure to be pointed than at Vrabel. To Cincinnati's side of the offense we go, and Ja'Marr Chase once again showed his speed and game-changing ability. With 5 minutes to go in the first, he took a screen pass 57 yards to set up Cincinnati's 2nd field goal. This one was from 45 yards out. He also brought in the biggest ball of the day, catching a 17-yard out with 15 seconds remaining to get the Bengals in position to hit that game-winning kick. He combined with T. Higgins to go for 205 yards, and both were absolutely spectacular. The killer combination is extremely difficult for secondaries to match up with, and Tennessee had absolutely no answers for it. Joe Mixon was bottled up all day, but his 16-yard touchdown scamper through the heart of the Tennessee Titans defense to start that second half broke things open a little bit for the Bengals. It was an excellent counter run where he displayed incredible vision and then speed to the outside, and he made it 16-6 Cincinnati. Mixon finished with just 54 yards on the ground. He averaged less than 4 yards a tote. But he did showcase that versatility that he's displayed all season. He contributed 51 yards through the air, and he finished with over 100 on the day. I'm pretty sure that Joe Burrow is going to live in an ice bath all week. He was pressured all day and took an ungodly number 13 quarterback hits. While he was not getting plastered, he was busy carving up that Tennessee secondary. Burrow was poised, he was confident, and though he did turn it over once and held the ball a little bit too long at times, there's only so much you can ask from a guy who's constantly scrambling for his life. He came up big in key moments, and he finished with 348 yards. While the touchdowns were not there here, Burrow played like a veteran, understanding the game flow and taking the points that he could. He did not make any big errors that ended up costing the team. The Bengals benefited from a few penalties that they committed themselves, the biggest one being the first opening possession. After starting the game with the pick, they took a sack on 3rd down. However, the play was never allowed to happen, as previous to the snap, they had already committed a delay of game penalty. That ended up allowing them to pick up a few yards and get a 38-yard field goal from Evan Mcpherson, the unsung hero in this game with ice water in his veins. He hit from 54 yards right before halftime and from 52 yards out to seal the victory. Joe Burrow actually said that before the kick, Mcpherson looked at his teammates and said, "Well, I guess we're going to the AFC Championship game." He would deliver on that promise. I have to believe that the confidence that Joe Burrow exhibits also passes on to his teammates, and it is clear that the rookie kicker has it in spades as well. He will be an invaluable component as his team faces the Chiefs next week. Cincinnati held their own on the defensive end, and they made some key stops when they were required. They only registered 1 sack in this game, but they took advantage of Tannehill's poor throws and got those 3 interceptions. They were clearly committed to stopping the running game. It was their #1 priority, and it ended up paying off, even though the Titans averaged nearly 7 yards a play. The Bengals had 5 tackles for loss and just 5 quarterback hits overall. They are going to have to figure out that secondary next week, however, as the matchup shifts greatly, and it's unlikely they receive the same gifts from Mahomes that they got from Tannehill in this one. Being able to hold the Titans on 3rd down and being opportunistic were the reasons that the Bengals were able to hang in, and they're going to need that type of play again to stick in with Kansas City, who they beat back in week 15. Head coach Zach Taylor did not beat himself. He took the points this time around, and it worked in his favor. I've loved his aggressiveness most of the year, but it certainly wasn't always the right way to go for him. He had a bad habit of being overly aggressive when it was not necessary and hurting his team, but that was not the case against the Titans. He took what Tennessee gave him and more or less abandoned the run game when it was not working. Some question it, but for me, it just made sense. You have a red-hot quarterback picking apart the defense, so you let him sling it. Burrow paid for it with bumps and bruises, but it was the Bengals' only chance for success. Cincinnati was 9-1 coming into this game when they led after halftime, and they were up 9-6 here after 2 quarters. They were able to continue that impressive streak. This was an epic back-and-forth affair from 2 very deserving teams that simply game down to turnovers as it usually does. You sprinkle in that poor game management from Mike Vrabel and the lack of execution on the offensive end, and you get an L for the Titans. My star of the game is easily 5th-round rookie Evan Mcpherson, who hit long, crucial field goals to extend leads and seal the deal as time expired. He is quickly making a name for himself in this league. In response to my questions coming in, Henry's impact was pretty minimal, and I'd even say that it was a bigger mental lift for the Titans to have him back than anything that he actually did on the field. The defense did hang in well, but they were thwarted by their own offense. The Bengals, on the other hand, crushed the hopes of a big return for the King, and Joe Burrow played like one himself. It was a team win for the Bengals, who will be exciting to watch in the AFC Championship game. I am going to make my pick for that AFC Championship game on Wednesday in my Bills and Chiefs rundown video, so make sure you check that out. If you are new to the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support is so very appreciated. It means the world to me. It enables me to do what I love so I can keep bringing you guys the content that you love. If you disagree with any of my takes, please drop those comments down below. Let's get the conversation started. I love the engagement. This is Relentless Press. I'm your host, Abraham Opats, and we'll see you next time.